Bizarre Brain Comics. Hello, welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I'm Gary. And thank you for joining me. This is where I like to take a look at some older comics and talk about the stories, the art, the characters, and the creators. Last time was a little bit on the lighter side. I wanted to continue that with this one, a little on the lighter side. Now I want to talk with you about a little bit about Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. And most of you probably at least know about Sabrina if you've never read any of them, of the comics. She's from Archie Comics. And has a recent resurgence in popularity with the Archie Comics overall universe reboot, and she got a makeover as well, and a recent TV series which I have yet to see, which was The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. But first, let us take a little cue here from the Big Book of Knowledge and see what it has to say. Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, is in Archie Giant Series magazine 544. That's this one from 1984. It is written by and drawn by Bob Bolling. And Sabrina is about a teenage witch from Archie Comics. And she was created by George Glatter and Dan DeCarlo. And she first appeared in Madhouse number 22 in 1962. And she is a half-witch with a mortal mother and a warlock father, and is being raised by her two witch aunts, Zelda and Hilda Spellman. Although, actually, the name Spellman didn't come up until the 90s sitcom with That's Sabrina, starring Melissa Joan Hart. I don't think she even had a last name prior to that, and of course that has been rolled into the comics. And she's living in the town of Greendale, which also did not appear until that sitcom, which is near Riverdale, where Archie and friends live. Of course, the town of Greendale was rolled into the comics, and then popped back up with both the shows Riverdale and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Her creation was apparently inspired by the film Bell, Book, and Candle, about a witch, a mortal man, and a mortal man. So like the film, Sabrina couldn't cry, couldn't fall in love, or lose her powers, and it had a magical cat familiar in the comic. It's named Salem, also living with an aunt. Was like the film, like in the film, but instead of having a warlock brother as in the film, she had a male cousin hanging around. That's Cousin Ambrose. Plus, she was supposed to cause little acts of naughty magic. Just little nuisance magic. And those magical limitations eventually disappeared. They just kind of let them go, because they didn't fit in with the necessity, especially since it's a teen humor magazine. She's got to have romance. And she eventually had her own title several times. Because mostly during the 60s, she was just appearing in Madhouse. In the 1970s, there was an animated series on Saturday mornings, and then a live action sitcom in the 90s, and more recently, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, based on the comic with a much darker take on the character. Yeah, it's downright in horror. At one point, she was a horror host in the book Chilling Adventures in Sorcery for about 3 issues, and that was also, of course, by Archie. And that title returned years later under with more serious stories and art under the Red Circle banner. That was without Sabrina. In those Chilling Adventures there, she was just, like I said, the horror host, and the stories were typical types of horror stories for the comics, but just toned down a little bit and done in the Archie cartoonish style. And had they been drawn more seriously, they could have been almost EC type stories. Except that in those stories, it seems that no one ever actually got harmed, but they got scared an awful lot. Okay, and that's all for that. Okay, so let us pay a little visit to magic with Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. Ooh, yeah. And here we have that issue of Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. Said this is number 544, 1984, Archie Giant magazine series. And the story featured in this is The Crystal Skull. Then that was written and drawn by Bob Bolling. Take a little look here. Here's an older one from the early 70s. I think it was 72, 73. This is at the time when the animated series, Sabrina's animated series, was on TV. And you can see her aunt, her witchy aunts here. They look just like witches. Over time, they changed too. They no longer look like witchy witches, but more or less regular ladies. There's a couple others from the 90s during the time of the Melissa Joan Hart TV series, and there's her cat Salem. And in the TV series, they gave Salem a backstory, made him a human who was put in cat form for punishment, and he talks, and they rolled that into the comics as well. They even had a short-lived series specifically of young Salem. And of course, here's more recent. This is featuring the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. This is Sabrina Super Special, and with the photo from that TV series. But I wanted to show you just a little something here, briefly. Can I pass it? No. Here we are. Reprint. This is reprinting the very first Sabrina story, and of course this is by George Glauder and Dan DeCarlo. Now, what's kind of surprising here, of course, this is 1962, and for the time, how the extremely provocative Sabrina looks for the time. And even and later Dan DeCarlo didn't even draw her quite that provocatively, because she's a witch, she's supposed to be a temptress, right? And even this story, it wasn't really a story, it was just basically a setup framing piece. for later stories. And that's kind of nice. Now let's take a little look into Sabrina. Now, this is a longer story. Most of the stories in Sabrina comics are like this. Short little 6 8 pages long little stories featuring Sabrina doing magic, getting in trouble, or helping somebody out. And she gets in trouble for doing good things with her magic. Well, in this case, this is a book-length story in which she's almost like a superhero. But one of the neat things in here is that it makes reference back to previous stories, both Sabrina and going clear back to a Little Archie story. If you're not familiar, Little Archie is just stories of Archie when he was little. There's Sabrina and the Crystal Skull. And we start off with some unusual action. This is Dr. Pyther, and we don't find that out until later, and he is using some strange powers to rob a bank, and the bullets just bounce right off the field around him. What the heck's going on? Yeah, he snatches what robs the bank, hops into this gizmo, and is gone off into the skies. Oh, what the heck was that? Then we change scenes to Sabrina at home, watching her favorite soap operas, when they have an interruption on the news telling about the robbery. Then boom, what the heck is going on here now? Everything's all shaken. And suddenly Della, the head witch, she appears riding on the storm stallion, and comes to Sabrina and says this is a problem, and we need your help because you have previous experience with this person, Dr. Pyther, and make reference to her from Sabrina 76, or to that particular issue. But there's nothing I can do. I'm not powerful enough witch. So you're temporarily upgraded to Teen Witch 2. She's Teen Witch 3. And with that, she's more powerful, and poof, she's got a costume. So suddenly she's kind of like a superhero. I know I was kind of surprising how Della looks here too, because she's very seductive looking. Granted, it's cartoonish and not overt, and almost superhero-ish herself. And with her new powers, she can fly. And Della takes her to see what the thing is. Here is a UFO. And they land there, and they find out that this guy, Dr. Pyther, he has a lisp, so his name is supposed to be Pyzer, but with his lisp, he pronounces his name Pyther, so everyone else says Pyther. And turns out this alien prince was kidnapped by Dr. Pyther and is being held someplace in the past. And Dr. Pyther is, that's how he's getting his magic, his super scientific powers, and is doing all these bank robberies so that he can finance more of his crazy scientific experiments. So here they go. And it turns out that he's holed up in a castle that was the hideout of Mad Dr. Doom, who was a villain that Little Archie encountered many times. And he's using Mad Dr. Doom's laboratory and his time taxi to pop around in time. So that was that. Here they are at the castle. The mansion, rather. And Della just leaves Sabrina here, and well, I don't know really what to do. First thing she does is fall into a trap. A trap door. But she catches herself before she can fall and goes through. The place is all spooky looking. And take a moment here to look at the art. And it's very nice, clean, crisp art. Standard Archie stylization. Basic three-tier, 6-panel layout. Some nice clear backgrounds, not a whole lot of darks. You can see some darks here in the foreground, but the darkened mood is mostly being conveyed by the color. She shrinks herself down. Sees Dr. Pyther. So she can't be seen. Dr. Pyther, he's about to make a little trip in time back in time to the Aztec times, where he's got that alien prince being held captive, and he zaps back because he needs to recharge his powers from a crystal skull that the Aztecs do. And there's a kind of a neat little montage of the time travel, zipping through time, and here they are back in ancient Aztec times. Yeah, and he gives them little goodies and stuff, and they think he's some kind of god. Sabrina's still sneaking around. She's looking around while Dr. Pyther is distracted, and here he sets up this thing on their sacred crystal skull to, when the sunlight hits it just properly, and he'll get his powers rejuiced. Meanwhile, she finds where the prince is being hidden, and she's surprised that he's a good-looking, young, human-looking alien, not anything like the little green beak-headed aliens, because the planet they're from has a whole bunch of different species. And so she's here to help him out, but she's got to stop Dr. Pyther. It's just a lot like a superhero. They have a lot of little jokes in the dialogue and the like. It helped keep it real light, and it is real light. It's just a fun little story here. And so just as he's about starting to juice up, and she zaps, and he counters with a kazang, and she zaps the thing off his head, but he kazangs her out. She lands she's unconscious and lands on the sacrificial altar. So they say, "Oh, we got a sacrifice. And we're going to sacrifice her right here. But first, she's got to be cleansed through the water from the sacred water from such and such a lake. They splash her. Well, meanwhile, Dr. Pyther is back to juicing up, and he distracts the priest, because he decides he just wants to steal the skull, and he distracts the priest with a little gizmo flashlight. Sabrina is awakened and magics herself away, and they're all disappointed about the and they're all disappointed about the loss of the sacrifice. Meanwhile, Dr. Pyther is running off with the skull, calls his time taxi, and poofs back to the present, then sets everything up so that when the sunlight hits it just right, he's going to get all juiced up again. And here comes the sun, and suddenly, what the heck's going on? And he's zapped, and there's little tiny Sabrina inside the skull. And then she goes, "Get out of my skull!" and so she grows back up to her normal size, which shatters. Oh, that's a surprisingly dynamic image right there for Archie Comics, and it's a real nice figure on her too. And shatters this crystal skull into a zillion pieces. And he goes, "No, my skull!" And he starts trying to collect all the pieces. And then sunlight hits it, and all kinds of reflected sunbeams, and boom, he's gone. It's like he's been disintegrated or something. So she picks up gets all his glasses, and that's all that's left of him. And she goes back to the time taxi, and there is the prince. She had shrunk him down and put him inside the time taxi. Now restores him to the size, calls the aliens. They come to pick him up. And he thanks her, and ask her out on a date, because they're going to have a big party on his home planet in a week. So there she is with him on the alien planet in a very lovely gown, and she's surprised at all the different kinds of aliens, and she's glad that Dr. Pyther is gone. But she says she has this feeling that there's something evil is watching. Something evil is watching me. And there we see at a distance Dr. Pyther in the time taxi, laughing his goofy little laugh. Yuck, 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 yuck. So he is not gone. He is not gone. And that's the end of the story. And Archie Comics occasionally did these more adventure type stories. I always liked them. Well, depending on what it was, had more adventure, and they were rare. They were a rarity, of course. Then they also had parodies, and this is kind of like a Sabrina parody of a superhero story. They didn't make her an actual superhero like they did within Archie. Had those superheroes, and made them spies and all this other stuff, and that was fun. And I want to take a brief look. Here is just some art from the comic. That is the chilling adventures of Sabrina. Just some beautiful, beautiful artwork here. Very lovely. Very lovely. And something you wouldn't expect from an Archie comic. Not that the Archie is bad, it's just that the stylization is very realistic and very grim, very moody in here, because it's supposed to be, because this winds up being a horror comic. And they had here's some stuff that's a bit tamer from a more recent series, and they even had a period in for a couple of years in the early 2000s, in which Sabrina had a manga makeover, and I've got some of that someplace too, and that's a lot of fun as well. When it's almost like Harry Potter. So I hope you enjoyed that. So that's all I've got for now. For now, of Sabrina. I might bring her back again another time for something else. And thank you for joining me. Like, share, subscribe, share it with your other comic friends. Some people who like, it's just nostalgia. People who like, especially they happen to be Archie Comics fans. But remember, comics are art, and Sabrina is magic.